Deep in the shadows of every imagination lies a realm of unspeakable horror few dare visit, where peace and tranquility dies, and fear and terror lives. So check under your bed, shut that creepy closet door, turn down the lights, and prepare yourself for Mind Shadows. It must have been around 4 a.m. when our little Yorkshire Terrier woke me up in a barking fit, took a flying leap off the end of the bed, and continued sounding her alarm all the way down the hall from the bedroom to the living room. "Those damned raccoons are at it again," I mumbled to my wife. She didn't respond as usual. Anytime the dog called for assistance between 11 p.m. and 8 a.m., the wife was totally offline. I began to stir a bit, just a little agitated that she had to go out so early in the morning. But it was then that I recalled the doggy door I had installed a few days before. The dog had trouble getting used to it in the beginning, but by the end of the first night, she was a pro. Someday soon, my brain would accept the fact that that doggy door is there, and then I'd be able to sleep peacefully. For now, that little Yorkie could let herself outside any time she heard those damned raccoons, and I knew this, which is why it was odd that she was still barking inside the house. Which meant one of those damn rodents must have found its way inside the house through that damn little door. I began to sit up to go check on her, and that's when her barking stopped. "About damn time," I mumbled again. Of course, the wife still had me tuned out. I was trying to get myself back to sleep when I realized that the dog hadn't continued her barking fit outside after all. She just totally went silent all of a sudden, which was a nice change, but completely out of character for her, and that bothered me. I finally decided it was time to get up to go check on her. That's when I saw the thing in the hall. I froze, keeping completely still, staring at it through the darkness of the room. It was standing in the doorway of our bedroom, backlit by a dim nightlight that we kept plugged in down the hall. It was a dark silhouette of a tall, thin figure, its shoulders hunched, with its knuckles hanging past its knees. Its head was oblong, with pointy ears, and it appeared to be bald. I couldn't tell if the thing was nude or not. I couldn't even see its face. And I watched as it cocked its head to the side, and somehow I knew it was staring right at me. Something was clutched in its right hand. It looked like one of my wife's wigs, the hair dangling between its fingers. Then, it brought the right hand up to its face, and I heard a faint whisper from our little dog as the thing in the hall took a bite out of a little limp body. I knew I was in that odd state between sleep and awake. But what the fuck was this? Was I dreaming? I wanted to rub my eyes, but a slight tinge of fear kept me from moving, and I didn't want to give this thing any reason to drop the dog and come at us. I needed to be sure I was able to get my hands on my gun first. I always slept with it on my side of the bed, in a holster tucked just under the mattress. My dad's old .38 caliber revolver. The only time I kept it loaded in the house was at bedtime. I used to keep it loaded all the time and hidden in my sock drawer. But my son Danny found it a couple of years ago when he was 6, as he was rummaging through our room, and the wife ripped me a new asshole over it. I wasn't sure who to be more pissed at the time. Myself for leaving the gun in a place where he could find it, or my son for sneaking into our room and rummaging around where he had no business. But that didn't matter. The wife preached at me for days about getting rid of the damn thing, saying all kinds of shit about kids shooting themselves or each other. Or even worse, someone breaking in, finding it, and using it against us. But my debate was pretty convincing, if I do say so myself. The damn gun is still in the house, tucked under my mattress on my side of the bed. Of course, if my argument had included defending my family against something in the hall, she would have laughed at me. But in this moment, I would be having the last laugh. Anyway, I was lying on my side, snuggled up behind my wife in the center of the bed, which meant the gun was about 1.5 feet behind me, tucked between our mattresses. Shit, I couldn't reach it without turning over, and I wasn't ready to do that just yet. I had no idea what the fuck this thing was standing in my doorway, or how fast it could move. The thing stood there, staring into the darkness of the room, backlit by a nightlight down the hall, its chest heaving with every breath, blood dripping from its jowls. I began to ever so slowly inch my way backwards towards the gun, keeping my eye on the thing. And then it moved, bringing the dog back up to its mouth, but instead of taking another bite, it appeared to be sucking on its little body, no doubt draining her of blood. It was then that I figured this thing must be some kind of vampire. I half-heartedly shook off a little laugh, because they don't exist. They're not real. Yet, there was one standing in my hall, sucking the blood out of my little dog. I could finally feel the edge of the mattress at my back, and that meant the gun was just behind my head. I was about to make my move for the gun when the thing stepped into the room and walked right up to my wife's side of the bed. It just stood there and stared at her. I kept very still, trying to control my breathing. Then it bent over her, and I still couldn't get a good look at it, but it was definitely there. With what little light there was from the nightlight in the hall, the one feature of this thing that I could make out was its eyes. There was almost a slight hint of humanity in them as it stared at my wife. And then my skin crawled as I heard it whisper to my wife, as if it was trying to get her to turn her head and expose her neck. And it worked, because the thing whispered the one word that would get her attention no matter how deeply she slept. In a raspy, almost inhuman voice, the thing whispered. She moved, and the thing bent closer as she turned her head, exposing her soft neck. That's when I went into action. I quickly threw the covers off and spun out of bed, landing on my knees on the floor. The .38's grip and trigger were peeking from between the sheets, making it easy to slide it from its holster. In one fluid motion, I drew the pistol, cocked the hammer, and aimed right at it. The thing saw me move and looked right at me, reaching out his hand. The wife turned on her bedside lamp and bathed my vision in blinding light. I pulled the trigger. But something was wrong. My heart sank because in a split second between the time that the light hit my eyes and the .38 let out its deafening yelp, I caught a glimpse of Danny's face looking at me, his hand held up as if trying to stop me from what I was doing. My eyes needed time to adjust to the sudden invasion of light, but my brain already knew what had happened. The wife screamed, and as my eyes became more focused and adjusted, I saw her face covered in Danny's blood and gore. She was in complete shock, hands trembling, and face frozen in an almost exaggerated expression of disgust and disbelief. It wasn't until I gathered my senses and stood up that I saw the carnage that I had created. On the floor, between the bed and the wall, my son's body was slumped in a pile of death. The bullet hit him in the center of the face, blowing away the entire top of his head. I vomited all over the bed at the sight, as well as the thought of what I had just done. I had just killed my only child, my little boy, my Danny. Denial grabbed me for just a second, but then my conscience beat it back. Was this real? It had to be. It felt real. The ringing in my ears from the .38's thunderous roar seemed real. My son's lifeless body looked real. Even the wife's sobbing and whimpering sounded real. I began to walk around the other side of the bed so I could better assess my situation. Between her sobs, I could hear the wife asking what the hell I had done, if I was insane. I reached the foot of the bed and got a better look at Danny on the floor, clutching his teddy bear. It wasn't a thing in the hall after all, and it sure as hell hadn't been eating our dog. That's when, in the near silence of the moment, I heard it again. That fucking inhuman whispering.
You sick fuck.
I couldn't believe where it was coming from until I turned my gaze to the wife sitting on the bed and saw that she wasn't herself. She was that fucking thing from the hall with the oblong head and pointy ears and bloody face. Its gray skin was stretched over its skull so tightly that I thought it would rip at any moment, and it smiled at me with a grin full of sharp teeth. I raised my gun. Displaying total defiance, the thing reached out to me and screamed with a huge mouth that came unhinged at the jaw. And from the depths of its throat, 8 tentacles, the size of human fingers lined with jagged teeth, emerged from its mouth. It looked as if a small octopus was trying to escape from its throat as the thing let out a guttural, ear-piercing scream. But my 38 screamed louder. The first 2 shots were to the face, and messy too. After the thing fell back onto the wife's pillow, the 3rd bullet caught it under the chin and ruptured the jugular, spraying its blood high into the air. I let out a victorious laugh and stepped over my son to get a better look at this thing that was now dead in my bed. But to my horror, I found myself staring at my wife's body, her face contorted in a death mask of blood, mucus, and gore. The hollow point bullets showered most of her brains across the bed's headboard, and now bloody chunks of it slid down onto her pillow like bits of her memories coming to their final resting place. I spun around, frantically searching the room for that damn thing. I knew it had to be somewhere. After a while, I just sat on the bed and dropped the gun. I considered calling the police, but I could already hear them outside. However, what I couldn't hear was our dog, Missy. By this time, she would have been announcing the arrival of the police, banging on my front door. But there was not a peep from her. No barking, nothing. And now, I'm lying in the top bunk of my jail cell, and I hadn't seen that thing from the hall in over a month. But it's after midnight, and I can finally rest again. Well, I can tonight anyway, because I just ripped that fucking thing's throat out with my bare hands for whispering at me from the bunk below. Thank you for tuning in to Mind Shadows. Tonight's episode was adapted from a short story by award-winning author of horror, Clive Carpenter. To read more from Clive, visit his website at www.authorofhorror.com. Join us again soon for another twisted tale of terror. Until then, may all your nightmares come true. Check out the description for links to our Facebook and Twitter pages. Also, please check out our Patreon page to receive some sweet Mind Shadows perks and merch and support the podcast. And be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell.